Marin Calloway stood in the fluorescent silence of Council Chamber B, Flagstaff City Hall, her left sleeve rolled to the elbow. Across the oak table sat Leland Croy District 3 councilman, silver cufflinks catching the overhead light. His face had gone the color of old concrete, not pale, not flushed, something worse. The color of a man watching a coffin lid slide open long after the burial. She held her arm steady. The tattoo faced him. A skull in a winged helmet, black ink faded to blue at the edges, a hairline crack splitting the right wing where the needle had jumped. A flaw no photograph could capture. A flaw only two people in the world would recognize. Croy's mouth opened. No sound came. 36 hours earlier, none of this existed. 36 hours earlier, Marin Calloway is just a tired woman trying to get to a diner before her daughter ran out of crayons. The ceiling fan in Silver Creek Diner had been broken since February. It still spun, but only at one speed, a slow, arthritic rotation that pushed warm air from one corner of the room to the other without cooling anything. The blades ticked against a loose screw every third pass. Mr. Odell, who owned the place and had owned it since Carter was president, kept saying he would fix it. He had been saying that since Clinton. Late afternoon light came through the west-facing windows at a hard angle, turning the linoleum gold and catching the dust that floated above the counter like something alive. The radio behind the register played low. Country, always country. A steel guitar bending through a song about highways and whiskey and women who left. Mr. Odell wiped the same spot on the counter he had been wiping for 40 years, the rag moving in circles that matched the fan above. Flagstaff, Arizona, October. The sort of day where the sky is so blue it looks painted and the air carries the faint bite of altitude and juniper. A town where nothing happens fast. A town where people know each other's trucks before they know each other's names. In the back corner at a two-person table that wobbled on one short leg sat Ren Calloway, 9 years old. Brown hair pulled into a ponytail that had started the day straight and now tilted 15 degrees to the left. A purple hoodie, 2 sizes too big sleeves pushed past her wrist cuffs stained with colored pencil. In front of her, a sketchbook. Not the kind from an art store. The kind from a dollar bin at the grocery pages thin enough to see through binding already cracking at the spine. She was drawing the man at the counter. Not Mr. Odell. The other one. A trucker with a beard like a bird's nest and a cap that said Peterbilt in letters so faded they were nearly invisible. She had his nose wrong. Too small. She erased it, blew the pink dust off the page, tried again. Better. Still not right, but better. She would fix it later. She always fixed things later. This was their routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Marin dropped Ren at Silver Creek after school because the gap between her hospital shift ending and her store shift starting was exactly 47 minutes. Not enough time to drive home and back. Enough time for Ren to sit in the diner, drink a hot chocolate Mr. Odell never charged for, and fill her sketchbook with the faces of strangers. Mr. Odell kept an eye on her. He always did. Not because Marin asked, though she had the first time, her voice tight with the particular guilt of a mother who knows she is asking a near stranger to watch her child. Odell had waved her off, told her the girl was fine, told her he had 3 granddaughters of his own and knew how to handle a kid with a pencil and too much imagination. Ren glanced at the door. She did this every few minutes. Not anxiously, not desperately. Just a quick look the way a dog checks the window for a car it knows by sound. Her mother's car was a 2009 Honda Civic Silver with a dent in the rear quarter panel shaped like the state of Nevada. Ren could identify it by the specific rattle of its engine from half a block away. The door stayed closed. The trucker finished his coffee, left $2 on the counter, and walked out. The bell above the door rang once thin and bright. Ren watched him go, then looked down at her sketch. Now she had no model. She started shading the beard from memory. She was good at this. Not prodigy good. Not the sort of good that made adults kneel down and say my goodness with their hands on their cheeks. The kind that came from doing the same thing every day for 3 years. Patient good. Quiet good. The kind nobody notices until the sketchbook is full and someone flips through it and realizes every page holds a face they have seen but never truly looked at. Her mother was late. Her mother was always late. This was not a source of pain for Ren. It was simply a fact like gravity or the wobble of the table. Marin Calloway worked 2 jobs. The first at Flagstaff Medical Center, where she was a registered nurse in the emergency department, 12-hour shifts that were never actually 12 hours because emergencies did not check the clock. The second at a convenience store on Route 66 4 evenings a week, standing behind a counter selling cigarettes and lottery tickets to people who needed neither. Wren understood this the way children understand weather. You do not blame the sky for raining, you just bring an umbrella. Her umbrella was the sketchbook and the hot chocolate and the slow tick of the ceiling fan in Silver Creek Diner. 23 miles away, Maren Calloway sat in her car in the hospital parking lot and stared at an envelope on the passenger seat. The envelope was white, standard business size. The return address read City of Flagstaff, Office of the Council, District 3. Inside was a single-page official letterhead informing her that her property at 412 Juniper Lane had been identified for potential acquisition under the Municipal Redevelopment Initiative for the East Flagstaff Corridor. A public hearing was scheduled. Her attendance was encouraged but not required. She had read it 3 times. The language was soft. Potential acquisition. Encouraged. The sort of words governments use when they have already decided and need the paperwork to look democratic. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Flagstaff area codes. She answered because nurses answer phones. It is trained into this. Every call could be the one that matters. A man's voice. Measured, not threatening. Worse than threatening. Polite. Maren Calloway. You lived in Las Vegas around 2012, that right? It was not a question. It was a confirmation. The man already knew. Maren's hand tightened on the phone. She could feel her pulse and her fingertips, each beat pressing against the plastic case. Who is this? Just checking some records. Old business. Nothing to worry about. She hung up, sat still. The parking lot was empty except for 3 other cars and a maintenance van. The October sun was dropping fast shadows stretching across the asphalt like dark fingers reaching for her tires. She looked at the rear-view mirror. Nothing behind her. Nothing that should scare a grown woman in a hospital parking lot in a small Arizona town at 4 in the afternoon. But her left wrist was burning. Not physically. The tattoo did not actually produce heat, but the skin around it tingled the way a scar does before a storm phantom, nerves firing at a memory the body refuses to forget. She looked at the tattoo. She did this sometimes when she was alone. Not admiring it, checking it, the way a soldier checks a wound that healed years ago but still aches when the weather changes. The skull, the helmet, the wings, the crack on the right wing where the needle had jumped because the artist, a man whose name she had promised herself she would never say aloud, had sneezed at the wrong moment and turned a perfect piece of ink into something flawed and therefore irreplaceable. Since that night, she had carried it. Through 2 states, 3 apartments, 1 pregnancy, 2 jobs, and more nights than she could count, where she woke at 3 in the morning with the sound of fists on a motel door echoing in her ears. She had never told anyone about Vegas. Not her coworkers, not her landlord, not the few men she had dated in the years since, brief relationships that ended when they reached the depth where secrets live, and she refused to open the door. Not even Wren, especially not Wren. Because what do you tell a 9-year-old about a night when her mother hid a bleeding stranger under a bed and lied to 4 men who would have killed them both? You tell her it is a story for when she is older. And you pray that older never comes. She pulled her sleeve down, turned the key. The Civic coughed, caught, settled into its familiar rattle. She checked the mirror again. Nothing. Checked it once more. Still nothing. But the feeling stayed. That prickling at the back of the neck, the ancient alarm system that lives in the base of the skull and does not care about logic or evidence. It only knows what it knows. She pulled out of the parking lot, turned right toward downtown. The sun was dropping fast now, shadows stretching long across the asphalt, reaching for her tires like dark fingers. She drove the way she always drove, carefully, both hands on the wheel, eyes moving between the road ahead and the mirror behind. A woman who had learned in a motel room in Las Vegas that the things that come for you do not always come from the front. She was 14 minutes from Silver Creek Diner, 14 minutes from her daughter, 14 minutes from a hot chocolate that was growing cold, and a sketchbook that was running out of pages, and a table that wobbled on one short leg. She did not know that in those 14 minutes, 6 motorcycles would park outside the diner, that her daughter would speak a sentence that would split the evening open like an axe through kindling. That a man named Graver would hear her name and remember a brother he had not seen in over a decade. She did not know any of this. She just drove, the way she always did, toward Wren, toward the only thing in the world that mattered more than staying hidden. Headed toward Silver Creek Diner, where her daughter was drawing strangers and waiting for a mother who was always late. Wren was on her fourth page when the sound started. She had finished the trucker's portrait and moved on to Mr. Odell himself. She drew him the way she saw him, which was not the way he saw himself. In her sketch, his eyes were kind, but tired, the wrinkles around them less like age and more like a map of every smile and every worry he had worn since opening the diner. His hands were large in her drawing, larger than life, because to Wren, those hands were the most important part of him. They poured her hot chocolate. They wiped the counter. They waved goodbye when Marin Civic finally rattled into the lot. She was working on his apron strings when the vibration began. At first it was nothing, a vibration more than a noise, the sort of low frequency that lives in the chest before it reaches the ears. The water in her glass trembled, tiny concentric rings spreading from the center outward, touching the sides, bouncing back. She watched them fascinated, put her finger on the rim. The glass hummed. Then the sound grew. Not gradually. It came in like a wave building from somewhere south on Route 66, and within 15 seconds it had gone from a hum to a rumble to a roar that made the windows rattle in their frames and the salt shaker walk a quarter-inch across the table. Mr. Odell stopped wiping. His hand froze mid-circle. He looked toward the window, and his face did something Wren had never seen it do. It closed, like a door, like someone had reached behind his eyes and pulled a shade down. He said one word, low, more breath than voice. Hell's Angels. The couple at the table near the register exchanged a glance. The woman put her fork down. The man reached for his wallet, not to pay, but to hold something familiar. An old woman 3 seats from Wren clutched her purse to her lap with both hands. Wren did not understand any of this. She just watched the water in her glass make its tiny circles and thought it looked like the rings inside a tree. 6 motorcycles. Harley Davidsons, every one. They came into the parking lot in formation, not side by side, but staggered each rider, holding a precise distance from the one ahead. The engines did not idle. They announced. Deep mechanical, the sound of pistons the size of fists compressing air and fuel and turning it into authority. They parked in a row, 6 black machines lined up with a precision that spoke of years and miles and a disciplined civilian's mistake for chaos. Chrome caught the late sun, leather creaked as weight shifted. Then one by one the engines died. The silence after was heavier than the noise. The door opened. Cold desert air rushed in, first carrying dust and the smell of exhaust and leather, and something older, something that belonged to roads with no names. Then the men, 6 of them, each one large enough to change the geometry of the room simply by standing in it. Leather vests over denim and flannel. Patches sewn and riveted across chests and backs, colors and insignia that meant nothing to most people and everything to those who knew. Gloves, thick-soled boots that hit the tile floor with a sound like gavels. The first through the door was young mid-20s curly hair tied low at the nape. His face was less weathered than the others, but his eyes had the same hard focus, the look of someone who has learned to assess a room in the time it takes to cross a threshold. This was Ryder. Behind him, an older man with a silver beard that fell to his chest like a breastplate. His hands were enormous knuckles, scarred and swollen, a rough pinky ring on his right hand that looked like it had been hammered from a railroad spike. Flint. He walked slowly, not from age, from a patience that never needed to hurry. 2 more followed, one thick-bearded, silent eyes scanning left to right. The other lean, long hair tied tight at the nape, a chain looped from belt to back pocket, moving with the economy of someone who fixes things for a living. This was Locke, a 5th broad and quiet, carrying his helmet under one arm like a soldier carrying a field cap. And then the last. He entered the way weather enters a canyon, not fast, not slow, inevitable. Graver. He was taller than the others by 3 inches and wider by the width of a man's hand. His hair was steel gray, cut short enough to show the shape of his skull. A beard thick and salted trimmed close to the jaw. His face held no expression, neither blank nor cold. Controlled. The face of a man who had decided decades ago that what he felt was his business and no one else's. His eyes moved across the room in a single sweep. Counter, tables, exits, Odell, the couple, the old woman, the child. He registered all of it in less than 2 seconds and showed nothing. The bikers moved to the large table near the back. Their boots made the floor speak with each step. They sat without discussion, each man taking a position that left Graver at the head back to the wall facing the door. This was not choreographed. It was habit. The habit of men who have sat in 1,000 rooms and always chosen the chair that lets them see who is coming. Graver raised 2 fingers. His voice came low and rough, the sound of a road that has been driven too long. 6 waters. Coffee. Black. Mr. Odell nodded. His hands shook as he poured. The metal spoon clinked against the cup rim once, twice, 3 times. He carried the tray to the table with the careful steps of a man crossing ice. The couple at the register stood. The man left a 20 on the table. They walked out without looking back. The bell above the door rang, and this time the sound felt like a warning. The old woman did not move. She sat frozen purse in her lap, eyes on her plate, breathing in shallow pulls. And Ren Calloway, 9 years old, ponytail, tilting hot chocolate, cooling sketchbook open. Ren was looking at Graver's left arm. He had rested it on the table when he sat. His jacket sleeve had ridden up past the wrist, and there in the yellow diner light, she could see it. A tattoo. Black ink, thick lines, the kind of work that goes deep and stays forever. A skull wearing a helmet. Wings spread wide on either side, sharp and angular, each feather defined like a blade. The detail was extraordinary. Under the diner's weak bulbs, the tattoo seemed to move the wings, flexing with each shift of the muscle beneath. Ren tilted her head, left, then right, the way she did when she was finding an angle to draw from. She had seen this tattoo before, not this exact one, smaller, simpler, faded, but the same skull, the same helmet, the same wings, right there on her mother's left wrist, in the soft skin below the heel of the palm. She had traced it with her finger 100 times. At bedtime, when Marin held her close and the sleeve of her nightshirt rode up. In the car, when Marin gripped the steering wheel and the ink caught the dashboard light. At the kitchen table, when Marin reached for the salt and the wings peeked out from under the cuff. Marin never explained it. Ren had asked once, maybe twice. Her mother had smiled the sort of smile that holds a door closed and said, "That is a story for when you are older." Now 3 feet from her chair, on the arm of the most imposing man she had ever seen, the same image stared back at her. Bigger, fiercer, every line sharper, every shadow deeper. Like looking at a house cat and then meeting the mountain lion it was modeled after. She could not help it. The curiosity was not something she chose. It was something that happened to her the way weather happens, the way the ceiling fan ticks. She leaned forward, placed both hands on the edge of her table, rose slightly in her seat, and spoke. Her voice was clear, light, the voice of a child who has not yet learned that some sentences change everything. "Hello, sir. My mom has a tattoo just like yours." The sound traveled across the 3 feet between her table and theirs. It hit the biker's table like a stone hitting still water. Then it kept going, past the bikers, past Mr. Odell, past the old woman with the purse. It filled the entire diner, every corner, every crack in the linoleum, every groove in the wooden chairs. And then silence. Not the ordinary silence of a quiet room. The silence of a room where something has been said that cannot be unsaid. Graver stopped breathing. His hand wrapped around the coffee cup did not move. His eyes, which had been scanning nothing in particular, locked on the girl. Every biker at the table went still. Ryder, mid-reach for his water glass, froze. Locke set down his coffee with a care that suggested the cup was made of glass and the table was made of dynamite. The thick-bearded one stopped chewing. The 5th man lowered his hands to his lap. Flint, the silver-bearded elder, turned his head toward Ren the way an owl turns toward a sound in the dark. Slow, precise. His eyes narrowed to slits. Mr. Odell took 1 step toward Ren's table, hand raised, palm out, mouth, forming words that did not come. He managed 3, half whispered. "Ren, sweetheart, don't." Too late. Graver turned his head. The movement was slow, not because he had not heard, because he needed to be certain he had heard correctly. His steel blue eyes found the girl, locked, held. His brows drew together, casting a shadow across the upper half of his face. His jaw tightened. A vein surfaced along his temple, faint but visible. He did not speak. He studied her the way someone studies a letter that might contain news of the dead. Ryder's right hand moved to his belt. His thumb touched the handle of a folding knife sheathed at his hip. Not drawing, not threatening. Reflex. The reflex of a man who has spent years in rooms where unexpected words are followed by unexpected violence. The thick, bearded biker looked at Graver, then at the girl. His expression was a knot of suspicion and caution pulled tight. 5 seconds passed. 10. The ceiling fan ticked. The radio played. A steel guitar bent a note that hung in the air like smoke. Then Graver spoke. His voice was lower than before, lower than the engines, lower than the desert floor. A voice that came from the bottom of something deep and old. What did you say about your mom and my tattoo? Wren blinked. She did not understand the weight of the room. She did not see the white knuckles or the locked jaws or the old woman pressing herself into the wall behind her. To Wren, this was a man at a table asking her a question, like a teacher, like Mr. Odell, like anyone. She sat up straighter. Her legs dangled off the chair, sneakers swinging. She spoke the way children speak when they are certain of something and cannot imagine why anyone would doubt it. My mom has the same tattoo, right here. She raised her left hand and pointed to the inside of her wrist, the exact spot. The spot she had touched on her mother's arm 100 times. A chair scraped somewhere in the diner. Someone pressed against the wall. The old woman's lips moved without sound. Graver placed his hand on the table. The thud was not violent, but it carried weight. He leaned forward, elbow on the wood, but his eyes never left the child. Flint growled, low, barely human. What did she just say? Wren smiled, not nervously, not bravely, just smiled. Because she was 9 and a man asked her a question and she had an answer. And that was how the world worked. My mom has the same tattoo. It has a crack on the right wing. She pointed to Graver's arm, tracing the line in the air above his skin without touching it. Right here. Mom said the tattoo guy sneezed while he was doing it, so the needle jumped. See the crack. The room stopped. Ryder stood up so fast his chair hit the wall. His hand closed around the knife handle. Not drawing, gripping, every tendon in his forearm visible. Boss. His voice was tight, a wire about to snap. This sounds like a setup. No kid knows that detail unless Graver raised one hand. Open palm, no words. Ryder stopped, sat, slowly, but his hand stayed near the blade as though the muscles in his fingers had their own memory and their own fear. Graver's eyes had not moved from Wren. He spoke again, each word placed like a stone in a wall. What is your mom's name? Wren answered without hesitation. She said the name the way a child says the name of someone who is the center of their world. Simply, completely, as though no other answer existed. Marin. Marin Calloway. The change was invisible but total. It moved through the biker table like a tremor through bedrock. Graver's jaw locked, his fingers interlaced on the table pressed together until the knuckles whitened. 3 bikers exchanged glances so quick and so loaded, they could have been a language of their own. Flint leaned forward, his enormous hands flat on the table, his silver beard catching the light. His eyes were not looking at Wren anymore. They were looking at something far behind him. He spoke. 2 words ground out through clenched teeth like gravel through a fist. Calloway. Vegas. The diner air thickened. A woman near the window stood shakily grabbing her bag. Mr. Odell ducked behind the counter, half his face visible, watching. Graver's eyes shifted to Flint. A question without words. Flint answered it. Vegas, 2012. She is the one who saved Kestrel. The name landed on the table like a blade. Kestrel. Every biker heard it. Every biker reacted. Ryder's hand finally left the knife. Locke set down his coffee cup with a click that sounded like a period at the end of a sentence. The thick-bearded one closed his eyes for a moment, as though the name had weight and he needed to absorb it. Graver did not move. But something behind his eyes changed. The cold assessment was gone. In its place was something older, something that lived in the part of a man that does not speak because it does not trust language to carry what it holds. When he spoke, his voice had dropped to a register that was almost private. A voice meant for one person, even though the whole room heard it. Kestrel was my brother, and he vanished after Vegas. The last person who saw him alive was a woman named Calloway. Not club brother, not road brother, brother, blood. Born from the same mother, raised under the same roof, beaten by the same father, saved by the same highway. The ceiling fan ticked 3 times before anyone breathed. The radio between songs, nothing but static, and the faint hiss of a signal bouncing off mountains. Flint leaned back in his chair. The wood groaned under him. He placed both hands on his thighs, palms down, the way someone does when trying to keep something inside from getting out. His eyes were distant, focused on a point beyond the diner walls, beyond Flagstaff, beyond all the years that separated this table from a dirt road behind a Las Vegas warehouse, where a man nearly bled to death. She pulled him inside. Flint's voice was low enough that only the biker table should have heard, but in the silence of the diner, low was loud. I was not there, but Kestrel told me after, before he disappeared. He said a woman opened a door she should have kept shut, pulled him in, locked it, used hot water and rags and whatever she had to keep him breathing. Locke set his jaw. His chain clinked against the table edge as he shifted. 4 men came looking for him. Flint continued, room by room, door by door. And this woman, this Calloway, she stood in the doorway and told them she had not seen anyone. Looked them straight in the eye, did not flinch, did not stammer, just stood there between a dying biker and the men who wanted to finish the job. The thick-bearded one exhaled through his nose, a sound like wind through a cracked window. Graver had not moved. His hands remained interlaced on the table knuckle soles, white tendons visible beneath the tattoo ink. His eyes were on Wren, but seeing through her, seeing through the wall, seeing through the years of unanswered questions. Ryder spoke, quieter now. The knife handle no longer interested his hand. How do we know this is real? The crack, Flint said. He looked at Graver, then at Wren, then at the tattoo on Graver's arm. Kestrel told me about the tattoo he left her. A variant of our mark, smaller, simpler, but with one flaw no one could replicate. The crack on the right wing. The artist sneezed. The needle jumped. I never forgot that detail because Kestrel laughed when he told me. He said it was perfect. He said the flaw made it real. Graver's throat worked, a tight, controlled motion. Wren had been listening, not to the words exactly. She was 9. She did not know what a warehouse in Vegas meant or what 4 men searching room by room implied. But she understood tones the way animals understand weather. She understood that the big man's voice had changed when he said the word brother. She understood that the old man with the silver beard was telling a story about her mother, and that the story mattered to these men the way her mother's bedtime stories mattered to her. She spoke again, small voice in a room full of men who had forgotten how to breathe. My mom tells me bedtime stories sometimes. She said once that she helped a man who was really hurt. She said he was brave. She never told me his name. The words landed on the biker table like a match on dry tinder. Not fire, but the heat, the certainty of it. Graver leaned forward, closer to the child, his thick forearms framing the coffee cup between them. His eyes searched her face, not for deception. Graver could smell deception the way dogs smell fear. He was searching for something else, a resemblance, a trace of the woman who had once stood in a doorway and refused to step aside. Your mom. Where does she work? Where do you live? She works at the hospital and at the store on Route 66. We live on Juniper Lane. It is a small house, but Mom says it is ours, and that is what matters. Juniper Lane. Flint repeated the name slowly, as though geography itself held a clue. Ryder crossed his arms. His posture had changed. The tension was still there, but it had migrated from suspicion to readiness. A leaning forward that had nothing to do with the chair. And the tattoo Graver said, "You have seen it many times." Wren nodded. "Lots of times. Mom does not show it to people. She wears long sleeves even when it is hot. But I see it when she reads to me at night, and sometimes when she is washing dishes. The sleeve goes up, and there it is, and she never told you what it means. She says it is a story for when I am older." Graver sat with that a long moment. A story for when you are older. The sort of sentence a mother uses when the truth is too heavy for small hands. He knew the weight of those sentences. He had been told a few himself long ago by a woman who eventually ran out of time to tell the stories she had been saving. The other bikers watched him. They knew the territory his mind was crossing. They had ridden with him through weather that killed weaker men. They had seen him take a bullet in Reno and pull the slug out with pliers and a belt between his teeth. They had never seen this expression. This was not pain or rage. This was the face of a man standing at the edge of a hole he had spent years avoiding and realizing he had to look down. His name would have been Cody, Graver said, very quietly, almost to himself. But Kestrel was what we called him, because he was fast, small and fast and always watching from a height. He could spot trouble a mile out while the rest of us were still reading the road signs. He paused. His thumb traced the edge of the skull tattoo on his own arm. I searched for him after Vegas. 3 years, every contact, every road, every motel from Nevada to Montana. Nothing. No body, no trail, just silence, the sort of silence that means a man is dead or does not want to be found. Flint nodded slowly. Same. Nothing. Graver looked at Wren again, something new in his eyes. Not warmth. Graver did not trade in warmth, but recognition. The recognition of a debt that does not shrink with distance or time, that only grows. Your mom saved my brother's life, and for all those years where I did not know her name. Wren blinked. Process this the way children process large truths, one piece at a time. My mom is really strong, she said. Not as an answer, as a fact. A foundational truth she carried the way she carried her sketchbook. Close. Always. The diner had gone completely still. Mr. Odell stood behind the counter with the rag limp in his hand. The old woman's eyes were no longer afraid. They were watching the way people watch something they know they will tell others about. The remaining customers, a man with a newspaper, a woman with a half-eaten hamburger, sat frozen in their seats, afraid to move, afraid to miss whatever was coming next. And then it came. Not from the biker table, not from Graver or Flint, or any of the leather-clad men who had changed this quiet afternoon into something no one in Silver Creek Diner would forget. It came from the corner. Small, electronic, insistent. Wren's phone, ringing from inside her backpack. A fox-patched cloth bag her mother had sewn from old fabric scraps hanging on the back of her chair. Wren grabbed it, dug inside with both hands, pulled out a phone with a cracked screen protector and a case decorated with stickers of cats and planets. The screen read, Mom. She answered. Mom, are you here? Marin's voice came through in fragments, broken by static distance or something worse. Wren, can you hear me? Mom, you sound funny. Where are you? Car broke. Dark road, aired road, east side past the construction on 89. Then the sound shifted, not static, not distance. Something in the background. A voice. Male. Close. Too close. There is someone. Marin's voice dropped. Not whispering, suppressing. The voice of a woman trying not to be heard by someone who is trying to hear her. I do not know who. Wren, listen. Do not go outside. Stay at the diner. Do not. The call dropped. The screen went dark. 3 bars to 0 in less than a second. Wren stared at the phone. Her face lost its color the way a page loses ink in rain, fast and total. She stood up. The chair scraped back. Her voice came out high and thin, the sound of a child who has just discovered that the world is larger and darker than the space between a diner table and a sketchbook. Mom. Mom. Every head turned. Locke half rose from his seat. Ryder was already standing, fists clenched. The thick, bearded biker placed both hands flat on the table, ready to push up. Graver turned his head. Slow again. That radar quality. He looked at Wren and his voice was different now. Not the interrogation voice, not the stone voice, a voice that carried instruction and protection in equal measure. Let me hear. Wren handed him the phone. Her hands trembled, small fingers against his massive palm. He looked at the screen. Dead signal. He turned it over. Looked at the call log. 1 call, 12 seconds, then nothing. What did you hear? Wren swallowed. She was fighting tears and winning, but only barely. My mom is stuck. Her car broke on a dark road. She said strangers are coming. She sounded scared. My mom does not get scared. That last sentence. My mom does not get scared. It landed in the room with a weight that had nothing to do with volume. It was the testimony of a child who knew her mother, who had watched her work double shifts and fix the plumbing and face down a landlord twice her size over a broken heater, who had never in 9 years of life heard that particular sound in her mother's voice. Ryder exhaled like he had been hit in the sternum. Flint swore. One word, low and ancient. Mr. Odell leaned over the counter, face gray. Could just be good folks stopping to help. Road gets dark out there. Ryder shook his head. Nobody wanders 89A at night on foot, not out past the construction zone. Whoever is out there came looking. Graver stood, his full height, his shadow covered half the table and part of the wall behind it. He looked at his crew, eye to eye, man to man, not asking, not commanding, stating. We owe her 3 words. A debt that had traveled across 1,000 miles of highway and more than a decade of silence to arrive at this table, in this diner, in this town, on this night. No one objected. No one hesitated. 6 men who moments ago looked like dangerous machinery and leather suddenly became something else entirely. They became purpose. Flint was the first to move. He stood without using his hands, rising from the chair, with a slowness that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with intention. He pulled on his leather jacket. The patches across the back caught the light. Skull and Wings, chapter name. Years of roads sewn into fabric. He zipped it to the throat. Ryder grabbed his helmet from the bench beside him. His movements were quick, precise, the economy of a young man who has trained his body to skip the gap between decision and action. He checked his phone. Signal strength. Map of Highway 89A. Construction zones marked in orange. He was already planning routes before Graver gave the order. Locke stood and reached for the chain looped at his belt, not as a weapon, but as inventory. Chain, flashlight, the compact toolkit he kept in a leather pouch on his hip. Multi-tool, zip ties, a folding knife sharp enough to cut seatbelt webbing. He carried these things the way a surgeon carries instruments. Not hoping to use them. Ready if he had to. The thick-bearded biker checked his boots, tightened his vest. The 5th man, broad and silent, simply stood and waited, helmet under his arm, face unreadable, the sort of man who does not need to be told what to do because he has already decided. Belt buckles rang, boot heels struck tile, zippers pulled, leather creaked. The sounds layered over each other like the tuning of an orchestra, each man preparing his own instrument for what was coming. Mr. Odell stepped from behind the counter. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. Not the voice of someone offering advice. The voice of a man who has seen enough of life to know when something larger than himself is happening, and the best he can do is stay out of its way. You folks need anything. Water, a phone, a flashlight. Graver looked at him. The look lasted half a second, but it carried a full sentence. It said, keep the diner, keep the people inside safe. We handle the rest. Mr. Odell nodded, stepped back behind the counter. His hands found the rag again, and he began to wipe, not because the counter was dirty, but because his hands needed something to do, while the rest of him watched 6 men prepare to ride into the dark. Graver bent to Wren's level, not crouching, kneeling. One knee on the cold tile so his eyes were level with hers. His face was close enough for her to see the lines cut deep around his eyes, the small scar on his chin, the gray in his beard that caught the diner light like frost on wire. Wren. His voice was quiet now, not soft. Quiet. The difference between a lake and a puddle. Both are still, but one is deep enough to drown in. We are going to find your mom. You will help my mom. Her voice cracked on the word mom. The first crack in the wall she had built since the phone went dark. Graver nodded. Not just help. We are repaying something that has waited a long time. Ryder knelt beside Graver. He held out a helmet. Too big for a 9-year-old, but it was what they had. The chin strap could be tightened. It would hold. Graver looked at Wren. One more question. His eyes asked it before his mouth did. You brave enough to come with us. We will find your mom faster if you can show us where she usually drives. Wren did not hesitate. She shoved the phone into her backpack, pulled the straps over both shoulders, and stood up straight. Her ponytail was still crooked. Her hoodie still too big. Her sneakers still scuffed. She looked like exactly what she was. A child, but her eyes were her mother's eyes, clear and steady and already looking toward the door. Yes, let me come. Graver stood, looked at his crew. 2 bikes with the kid, 3 ahead clearing. I ride last. Everyone nodded. No discussion. Orders received and understood the way muscles understand nerve signals. They moved toward the door. 6 tall men in leather boots heavy on the tile, and between them, a girl in a purple hoodie with a fox patch backpack and a borrowed helmet under her arm. The neon sign outside cast their shadows long and strange across the parking lot. 6 giants and one small figure, an image that every person left in Silver Creek Diner would carry for the rest of their lives. The old woman at her table exhaled for what felt like the first time in 10 minutes. She whispered to no one in particular, "They are really going to protect that little girl." Mr. Odell shook his head slowly. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. "Not just the girl. They are protecting their debt." The man with the newspaper folded it carefully, set it down, and watched through the window. The woman with the hamburger had both hands pressed to her mouth. Outside, the desert night had arrived. Cold and vast and absolute. The sort of dark that only exists in places where cities are far apart and the earth stretches flat to the horizon in every direction. Stars above, thick as sugar, spilled on black cloth. A quarter moon hanging low in the west, giving just enough light to see the chrome of the 6 Harleys, lined in their row metal, gone silver and blue under the sky. The air smelled of juniper and cooling asphalt, and the distant ancient scent of red dust that has been settling on this land for 1,000 years. Wind came from the north, steady, cold, carrying the first bite of October nights that remind people they live at 7,000 feet, and the desert does not care about comfort. Graver walked to his bike. His boots crunched on the gravel lot. He swung a leg over the seat and settled into it, the way someone settles into a chair used for decades. The leather creaked. The handlebars were worn smooth where his gloves had gripped them through 100,000 miles. He did not put his helmet on yet. He looked at Wren. Wren climbed onto the back of Ryder's bike. She had never been on a motorcycle. The seat was wide and hard and vibrated faintly even with the engine off. She wrapped her arms around Ryder's waist. Her hands barely met on the other side. The leather of his jacket was cold against her cheek. She could feel the buckle of his belt against her forearm. Ryder glanced back at her, one look, not reassuring, not false, just a look that said, "I know you are there and I will not let you fall." Then he faced forward, his jaw set like a bolt sliding home. 6 engines fired, one after another, each ignition adding its voice to the chorus. Not simultaneous, sequential, like a heartbeat finding its rhythm after a long stillness. The sound built in layers, bass upon bass, until the ground beneath Silver Creek Diner trembled, and the glass in the windows hummed a note too low for human ears, and the neon sign outside flickered once as though even electricity respected what was happening. The parking lot filled with light. 6 headlamps, halogen white cutting cones through the dust. The beams crossed and separated and crossed again as the bikes shifted in their row finding formation. 3 in front, 2 in the middle flanking Ryder and the child. Graver last alone, his single headlight steady as a lighthouse beam. Graver spoke. His voice carried over the engines the way a captain's voice carries over open water. "Find Marin Calloway, whatever it takes." The first 3 bikes pulled out of the WA and onto Route 66. Headlights sliced the darkness. The engines screamed and then settled into a deep rolling thunder as the riders found their speed. Ryder followed with Wren pressed flat against his back, her borrowed helmet reflecting the moon, her fox patch backpack pressed between them like a small shield. The 5th bike flanked them close enough that Wren could have reached out and touched the rider's arm. And Graver last, his headlights sweeping the road behind and the road ahead. Watching everything, missing nothing. The way he had watched roads for 30 years. The way his brother had once watched from heights before the world pulled him down. They turned east onto Highway 89A. The desert opened before them, black and endless, the road a pale gray ribbon unspooling into nothing. Saguaros stood along the shoulders like sentinels, their arms raised against the stars. Wind hit them broadside, carrying sand that pinged off chrome and leather and the visor of Wren's too large helmet. 6 engines roaring through the Arizona night, 6 headlights burning holes in the dark. And in the center of the formation, held between 200 miles of road experience and the combined weight of 6 men who had lived their lives on the wrong side of almost everything, a 9-year-old girl riding toward her mother and a debt that had waited too long to be paid. Behind them, Silver Creek Diner sat in its yellow light, ceiling fan ticking, Radio playing, coffee growing cold on a table where 6 men had been sitting 60 seconds ago. The neon sign hummed in the window, casting red and blue on the empty parking lot. Mr. Odell picked up the cups, wiped the table, stacked the saucers, pushed the chairs in one by one the way a man closes up after something important has ended and the room needs to be put right. Then for the first time in 40 years, he walked to the front door and turned the sign from open to closed. He stood there for a moment, hand on the glass, looking out at the empty road where the taillights had already vanished. He did not know why he closed early. It just felt like the only thing left to do. Highway 89. A runs northeast out of Flagstaff like a scar across the face of the desert. 2 lanes, no median, no streetlights once you pass the last gas station on the edge of town. Just asphalt and darkness and the occasional reflective mile marker catching headlights before vanishing behind. The formation held tight. 3 bikes in front spread wide enough to sweep the road with overlapping headlight beams. Ryder and Wren in the center, flanked by the broad, silent biker on the left and the thick-bearded one on the right. Graver at the rear, alone, his single headlight painting the road behind him in sharp white. Wren pressed her face against Ryder's back. The leather smelled of oil and road dust and something metallic she could not name. Wind hit her from every angle, pulling at her hoodie, pushing against the borrowed helmet that sat too loose on her head. She tightened her grip around Ryder's waist. Her fingers ached from holding on, but she did not let go. The desert at night is not empty. It is full of shapes the mind cannot quite resolve. Boulders that look like crouching animals. Junipers that look like men standing still. Shadows that move when the headlights sweep past, then freeze when the light moves on. Wren saw all of it through the visor and understood none of it and held on tighter. Ryder shouted over the engine, not turning his head, projecting backward through the wind. "All good, kid. We will find her quick." Wren did not answer. She nodded against his back, though he could not see it. Her lips moved behind the visor, forming a word she did not say aloud. "Mom." Graver at the tail of the formation was not watching the road ahead. He was watching the road behind. His mirrors, adjusted wider than standard, gave him a panoramic view of the highway stretching back toward Flagstaff. For the first 7 miles, the view was empty. Black asphalt under black sky. Nothing. Then at mile 8, he saw it. A pair of headlights. Small, set low, the color of weak tea, the sort of yellow that comes from old halogen bulbs on a vehicle that has not been maintained. They appeared around a curve half a mile back and held position, not closing, not falling back, matching the formation's speed with a precision that was either coincidence or intention. Graver watched for 30 seconds. The lights held. He eased off his throttle slightly. 2 miles per hour, the sort of deceleration no one ahead would notice. He watched the lights. They slowed in perfect sync. 2 miles per hour. Exactly. Graver's jaw tightened. He reached to the small intercom unit clipped to his collar, pressed the button twice. 2 clicks. The signal the group knew from 1,000 rides. Tail. We have a tail. Flint, leading the front 3, checked his right mirror. His voice came through the intercom low and graveled. "See it. Silver sedan, old model. Cannot make the plate." Ryder felt the formation shift before the words came. The bikes ahead tightened their spacing. The flanking riders moved closer to him and Wren. He glanced in his mirror and saw far back the dim yellow lights holding their distance like a patient animal following a scent. He did not tell Wren. He adjusted his grip on the handlebars and opened the throttle a fraction wider. The road climbed, a long, slow grade that led toward the construction zone east of town. Orange barrels appeared in the headlights, reflective tape flashing. A reduced speed sign. The pavement transitioned from smooth asphalt to rough gravel, where crews had been working. The bikes bucked and shuddered over the uneven surface. Wren's teeth rattled inside the helmet. Graver held his speed through the construction zone, watching the mirror. The sedan entered the rough stretch and slowed hard. Its headlights bounced and swayed as the suspension fought the gravel. Dust kicked up behind it, a pale cloud in the moonlight. But it didn't stop. It kept coming. Through the construction zone and out the other side where the road smoothed again and the desert opened wide on both shoulders. The sedan emerged from the dust and resumed its position. Half a mile back, matching speed, not coincidence. Intention. Graver spoke into the intercom. 1 sentence, whoever is back there, they are not following us. They are following whoever called the kid's phone. Flint's reply was immediate. Marin. Graver did not answer. He did not need to. The name was enough. The conclusion was clear. Someone had been watching Marin Calloway before the bikers ever arrived at Silver Creek Diner. Someone who knew she would be on this road tonight. Someone who had made a phone call to confirm her name and her past. Someone who had sent the sedan, or was the sedan, to track her movements. The bikers had not led the tail to Marin. The tail had been there first. The bikers had simply joined the same road. This changed nothing about the mission and everything about the threat. Graver opened the throttle. The Harley surged forward, closing the gap between himself and the formation. He pulled alongside Ryder close enough that Wren could see the side of his face in the glow of his own headlight. His jaw was set. His eyes were forward. He looked at Ryder once brief but complete, and the look said what words would have wasted time saying. Keep the kids safe, whatever comes, Ryder nodded once. Wren felt his body shift, his weight settling lower on the bike, his shoulders squaring. The posture of a man preparing for something he hopes will not happen, but knows it might. The formation accelerated. 6 engines roaring, louder headlights reaching farther into the dark. The desert blurred past. Wind screamed through the blast in Wren's helmet. She ducked closer to Ryder's back, eyes squeezed shut, arms locked. And then around a long, sweeping curve where the road bent north toward the foothills, Flint's voice came through the intercom. Sharp, certain, vehicle ahead, right shoulder, hazard lights. Marin Calloway's silver Civic sat crooked on the shoulder of Highway 89A, its front right tire sunk into the soft gravel at the road's edge. The hazard lights blinked in a slow, tired rhythm, orange pulses that looked like a heartbeat running out. The hood was up. Steam rose from the engine in thin white threads that the wind tore apart before they could reach the scone. And standing beside the car, illuminated by the blinking hazards and the faint glow of a phone screen she was trying to get a signal on, was Marin. Her hospital scrubs were still on under a denim jacket. Her hair was down, blown across her face by the wind. She stood with her back to the car and her eyes on the road ahead, not because she expected help from that direction, but because the sound she had heard moments ago, footsteps on gravel, a voice she did not recognize, had come from behind. Duff Lanigan stood 15 feet from her, a big man thick through the chest and belly, wearing a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows and work boots caked with red mud. He held a short iron tire lever in his right hand, not raised, not swinging, just held. At his side, the way someone holds a tool he wants you to notice. His face was flushed. Not from alcohol, though the smell of whiskey came off him in waves strong enough to reach Marin from 15 feet. Flushed from something else. Adrenaline on purpose. The particular redness that comes from following instructions and knowing the person who gave them does not tolerate failure. You scratched my truck, he said. His voice was thick, slurred at the edges, but the words were too precise for a man as drunk as he appeared. The slur was performance. The precision was real. I saw you pull out of that lot, and you hit my mirror. Marin shook her head. She had not hit anything. She had not been near any truck. She knew this the way she knew her own hands. But the man was not interested in truth. He was interested in time. He was keeping her here. On this road. In this dark. I did not touch your truck, she said. Her voice was steady. Not loud, not pleading. The voice of a woman who had spent years in emergency rooms where panic kills and calm saves. I am going to get in my car and call a tow. You should go home. Lanigan stepped forward. One step, the tire lever swung slightly at his side, pendulum-like. You are not going anywhere until we settle this. Then the light came. Not one light, 6. White and blinding, sweeping around the curve like a wall of fire. The sound arrived half a second wide. 6 Harley engines roaring in formation. The combined noise loud enough to rattle the hazard light lenses in their housings. Lanigan turned. His face went from threatening to blank in the time it takes a headlight to cross a man's eyes. He raised one hand to shield himself from the glare. The tire lever hung forgotten at his side. The first 3 bikes split around Marin's Civic like water around a stone. Flint and Locke and the thick-bearded biker engines dropping to idle boots, hitting gravel bodies upright and moving before the machines had fully stopped. They formed a semicircle behind Lanigan, blocking the road, blocking retreat, blocking everything except the narrow space where Marin stood. Ryder pulled up beside Marin's car. Wren was already moving before the bike stopped scrambling off the seat with the coordination of terror helmet falling off as she ran. Mom. Marin turned, her face tight with fear, and controlled fury broke. Not collapsed. Broke open, the way a dam breaks. Not from weakness, but from the sheer volume of what was being held back. Wren slammed into her, arms around her waist, face buried in the denim jacket. The force of a 9-year-old body hitting an adult at full speed, driven by 12 minutes of the worst fear she had ever known. Marin's arms closed around her. Automatic. Absolute. The embrace of a woman who has spent 9 years building a wall around one person and will not let anything through. Baby, I am here. I'm right here, my baby. Graver was the last to arrive. He killed his engine, swung off the bike, walked toward Lanigan with steps that made no sound on the gravel because his boots were so heavy they pushed straight through it. Lanigan backed up. 1 step. 2. His eyes moved from Graver to Flint to Locke to the thick-bearded biker and back to Graver. 6 men in leather. Patches. Tattoos. The sort of men who make a dark highway feel like a boxing ring with no referee. He tried to speak. The words came out wrong. Who? Who are you people? Graver did not answer the question. He stopped 3 feet from Lanigan, close enough to see the man's pupils, and spoke one sentence. Low, final. The sort of sentence that does not need repetition because it is heard not just by the ears, but by the spine. Step back. Lanigan stepped back. The tire lever dropped from his hand. It hit the gravel with a sound like a gavel. Flint moved forward, picked up the lever, set it on the hood of Lanigan's truck, which sat 40 yards up the road, parked at an angle that suggested a man who had been waiting, not driving. A man who had pulled over ahead of Marin's Civic and walked back. Ryder circled behind the truck. The keys were in the ignition. He pulled them out in one smooth motion and tossed them to Locke, who caught them without looking and dropped them into his jacket pocket. Lanigan's bluster was gone. In its place was the particular fear of a man who has overestimated his own position and underestimated the world's capacity to correct him. She scratched my truck. I just wanted her to stop. The thick-bearded biker grabbed Lanigan by the collar of his flannel shirt. Not violently, firmly, the way you grab a dog that is about to run into traffic. He walked him backward 3 steps until Lanigan's shoulders met the side of his own truck and held him there. Lanigan did not resist. He had passed through anger and arrived at the place beyond it where survival instinct overrides everything else. Graver turned to Marin. She was still holding Wren, one hand on the back of her daughter's head, the other gripping the denim jacket so tight her knuckles were white. She looked at Graver the way a person looks at a door that has just opened in a wall they thought was solid. Confusion. Relief. Fear of what might come through next. Graver nodded at her. Not a greeting. An acknowledgement. The acknowledgement of a man who recognizes a face he has never seen but has spent years imagining. You are Marin Calloway. It was not a question. But Marin answered it anyway. She straightened. Wren still clinging to her waist, her chin rose slightly. The automatic posture of a woman who has learned that standing tall is the first defense against whatever is coming. Yes, we are friends of Kestrel. The name hit her like voltage. Her body went rigid. Her hand tightened on Wren's shoulder. Her eyes, already wide with the adrenaline of the last 20 minutes, went wider still. Not with fear, with recognition. The recognition of a name she had not heard spoken aloud in over a decade, but had never forgotten. A name she whispered to herself sometimes in the dark in the early hours when the motel room came back to her and the sound of fists on doors filled the space between her heartbeats. Kestrel. Graver saw the reaction. Saw the way the name moved through her body like a current. He knew then with the certainty of a man who has spent his life reading people the way sailors read water that everything the child had said was true. This woman had saved his brother. This woman had stood in a doorway and lied to men who would have killed her for it. Graver turned back to Lanigan, pinned against his truck. He bent slightly, not close, just enough to make the geometry of the situation clear. Why are you here? Lanigan's eyes darted. Left, right, looking for an exit that did not exist. She scratched my Graver, raised one finger. The lie died in Lanigan's mouth. I will ask once more. Lanigan swallowed. The sound was loud in the desert silence. His face crumpled. Not tears. Collapse, the structural failure of a man whose story has been kicked out from under him. I got paid. Okay. Someone paid me. Keep her on the road. Keep her stopped until he was done at City Hall. That is all I know. That is all he told me. Who? The man's eyes squeezed shut, as if not seeing the biker in front of him would make the question disappear. Graver waited. He was good at waiting. He had waited years to find the woman standing behind him. He could wait 12 more seconds for a name. Lanigan broke, the way men break when the cost of silence exceeds the cost of speaking. Croy, Leland Croy, councilman. He said she was a problem. He said to keep her off the road until morning. That is all, I swear, that is all. The name went through the group like a blade through cloth. Flint looked at Graver. Ryder looked at Flint. Locke tilted his head slightly, the motion of a man filing a name in a place where it will not be lost. Graver straightened, stepped back from Lanigan, turned to Marin. Marin had heard every word. Her face had changed. The fear was gone. The confusion was gone. In their place was something harder. Something that had been building behind her ribs for over a decade and had just been given a name and an address. Croy, she said. The word was quiet, but it cut the air. I know that name. Every biker turned to her. Marin's hand went to her left wrist. She pulled the sleeve of her denim jacket back. The tattoo was there. Small, faded, a skull in a winged helmet with a hairline crack on the right wing. She held it up. Not for the bikers, for herself. As though she was reading a map she had carried for years and was only now understanding where it led. The night I helped Kestrel, she said. Her voice was low and steady, the voice of a woman who has decided to speak after a long silence and will not be interrupted. 4 men came looking for him. They went door to door. When they got to my room, I stood at the door. I told them I had not seen anyone. She paused. The wind moved her hair across her face and she did not push it back. Her eyes were not on Graver. They were on a point in the middle distance, 2 states and over a decade away, where a 22-year-old nursing student stood in a doorway in a motel that smelled of mildew and bleach and the copper tang of blood that no amount of cleaning would remove. He was under the bed. Marin said, barely conscious. I had pushed him under and covered the gap with my suitcase and a blanket. The blood had soaked through the sheets. I flipped the mattress so the stain was underneath. When they knocked, I had 3 seconds to check the room. 3 seconds to decide if there was anything visible that would give him away. There was a bloody handprint on the bathroom door frame. I saw it as I reached for the front door. I stepped in front of it and opened the door with my back against the frame. She closed her eyes. Opened them. 4 men stood in the hallway. 3 were big, the sort of big that comes from work, not gyms. Thick hands, dirty boots. They smelled like sweat and gasoline and something sour. But the 4th was different. He stood behind the others, clean-shaven, pressed shirt, and an expensive watch on his left wrist that caught the hallway light every time he moved his hand. She looked at Graver. The 4th man did not look like he belonged in a motel hallway at 2 in the morning. He looked like someone who had somewhere better to be and was annoyed that violence was taking so long. He gave the orders. The others listened. When they asked me if I had seen a man bleeding, it was his eyes I looked into, not the others, his, because he was the one who would decide whether they believed me. Marin's hand was on her wrist now, her thumb pressing the tattoo, the way a person presses a bruise to remind themselves it is real. I said 2 words. Did not see anyone. I did not blink. I did not look away. I do not know why he believed me. Maybe because I looked at him the way I looked at patients in the ER, without judgment, without fear, like he was just another person standing in my doorway and I had nothing to hide. The desert was silent. Even the wind had paused, as though the land itself was listening. They left. Marin said, "Move to the next door." I closed mine, locked it, slid down the wall to the floor, and sat there shaking for 10 minutes before I could move again. Kestrel was still under the bed, still breathing. Barely. She looked at Graver. His face was stone, but his eyes were not. I kept him alive for 3 days. Hot soup from the vending machine microwave. Hydrogen peroxide on the wounds. Butterfly bandages from a first aid kit I had bought for my nursing classes. On the 3rd night, he was strong enough to stand. He thanked me. He tried to bring me to meet the club. I said no, I did not want any more of that world. I just wanted peace. She smiled, but the smile held no warmth. Just memory. Before he left, he gave me this. She lifted her wrist. He said it would protect me. He said any brother who saw it would know what it meant. Then he walked out the door, and I never saw him again. Flint leaned forward. His silver beard caught the moonlight. But you saw the fourth man again. Marin nodded. 2 years ago, I moved to Flagstaff because I thought no one from Vegas would ever find me in a small mountain town. Then I saw his picture in the local paper. Campaign ad, Leland Croy, running for city council. I almost dropped the paper in the grocery store. Same face, older, polished, but the same eyes, the same jaw, the same expression like the world owed him something and was late on the payment. Silence on the dark highway, wind, gravel shifting under boots. Ryder spoke first, so the councilman is the one who tried to kill Kestrel. Marin looked at him. He was not trying to kill Kestrel personally. He was the one who ordered it. The muscle was hired, but the order came from him. I am certain of it. Graver's face had gone still. Not blank. Still. The stillness of deep water before a current shifts. And you never told anyone. Marin's jaw tightened. Who would I tell? I was 22. I was alone. I had just hidden a bleeding biker under my bed and lied to 4 men who could have killed me. I moved. Changed my number. Kept my head down. Got a nursing degree. Had Ren. I thought if I stayed quiet and stayed small, it would all stay buried. She looked at the letter from the city, the one she had left on the passenger seat of the Civic. Through the cracked windshield, she could see the edge of the envelope, white paper glowing faintly in the hazard light pulses. Then last week I got a letter. City wants to acquire my property. East Flagstaff Redevelopment Initiative. Signed by Leland Croy. And today I got a phone call from a man who knew my name and knew I had lived in Vegas. She looked at Graver directly. My house is on Juniper Lane. That lot used to be a motel complex. The same motel where I helped Kestrel. They tore it down and built houses over it 8 years ago. But the foundation is still there. Under my house. Under my neighbor's house. Flint understood first. His eyes widened beneath the heavy brows. He is not acquiring your land for development. Marin shook her head. He is burying the last piece of evidence. If there is anything left in that foundation, anything that ties him to what happened in 2012, demolishing the houses and pouring a new slab over it makes it disappear forever. Graver closed his eyes. 2 seconds. When he opened them, the stillness was gone. In its place was something that looked from the outside exactly like calm. But everyone at that roadside knew the difference between calm and controlled fury, the way sailors know the difference between a still sea and the eye of a storm. When is the hearing, he said. Marin answered, tomorrow, 10 in the morning, City Hall, Council Chambers. Locke pulled out his phone, checked something, looked up. Public hearing. Open to all residents. Graver looked at Marin, a long look. The sort of look that measures not just a person, but the distance between what they have endured and what they are willing to do next. Then he asked the only question that mattered. What do you want to do? Not what should we do? Not what is the plan? What do you want to do? The question of a man who understood without being told that this was not his fight to lead. That the woman standing in front of him had carried this weight for years and had earned the right to decide how it was set down. Marin did not hesitate. She looked at Ren, who was still pressed against her side face buried in the denim jacket, small hands gripping the fabric. She looked at the tattoo on her wrist. She looked at the 6 men standing in the dark on a highway in Arizona. Men she had never met. Men who owed her a debt she had never asked for, men who were here because a 9-year-old girl had spoken one sentence in a diner and cracked open a door that years of silence had tried to seal shut. I am not running anymore, Marin said. I have medical notes from that night. I kept them. I was a nursing student. I documented everything. Wounds, timestamps, descriptions. It is in a box in my closet. I kept it because I could not make myself throw it away. She paused. Her voice did not waver. I am going to that hearing tomorrow, and I am going to tell them exactly what Leland Croy is trying to bury. Graver nodded. Once. Slow. The nod of a man who has just heard the answer he expected and respected. Then he turned to his crew. We get her home. We get her safe. And tomorrow morning we sit in that hearing room. Flint's mouth curved, not a smile. The faintest indication that a man who had spent 60 years expecting the worst from people had just been reminded that the worst was not all there was. Ryder was already moving. He knelt beside the Civic's front tire, checking the angle, assessing damage. Locke was under the hood before Ryder finished, standing, flashlight between his teeth, hands moving through the engine bay with the precision of a man who has kept machines alive on roads far worse than this one. Out of oil. Hose split. Nothing fatal. He worked in silence. Ryder handed him tools. The thick-bearded biker held the flashlight. 15 minutes. That was all it took. Hose patched. Oil topped from a quart lock kept in his saddlebag. The engine turned over on the first try. The Civic shuddered, caught, and settled into its familiar rattle, the sound that Wren could identify from half a block away. While the bikers worked on the car, Graver stood with Marin at the roadside. Lanigan sat on the ground beside his truck, wrists zip-tied in front of him, saying nothing. The thick-bearded biker stood over him, arms crossed, casting a shadow that covered Lanigan like a blanket. Locke had already gone through Lanigan's phone. The messages were there. From a contact listed only as LC. 3 texts. The first sent at 4:17 that afternoon. She will be on 89A after 6, Silver Civic. Keep her stopped until I finish at the office. The second sent at 5:41. Do not let her leave. Do not hurt her. Just time. The third sent 12 minutes ago while the bikers were riding toward this exact spot. Is she still there? Locke held the phone up. Graver read the messages. His expression did not change, but his right hand closed slowly into a fist, then opened again. A controlled release of something that wanted very badly to be uncontrolled. He looked at Marin. We need this phone. Marin nodded. She understood evidence. She was a nurse. She documented everything. She had been documenting everything since a night in 2012 when she pulled a stranger through a door and refused to let the world take him back. Locke photographed every message, saved screenshots, then placed the phone in a plastic bag from his toolkit and handed it to Marin. She held it the way a woman holds a weapon she did not ask for but will not put down. Graver turned to the group. Ryder, call it in. Drunk man threatening a woman on the shoulder of 89A mile marker 12. We have his keys. No one is hurt. Ryder dialed, spoke briefly, hung up. The distant wail of a siren began, faint and growing. Red and blue lights appeared on the horizon, bouncing off the low hills to the west. Graver stepped back, signaled his crew. The bikers moved to their bikes, lined up, hands at their sides, simply present. The posture of men who have been misunderstood their entire lives and have stopped caring about correction, but have not stopped caring about being correct. The patrol car arrived, 2 officers. They saw the zip-tied man against the truck, the keys on the hood, the tire lever, the woman and child by the Civic, the 6 bikers standing silent in a row. Statements were brief. Lanigan reeked of bourbon. The officers smelled it from 6 feet. His truck was parked facing the wrong direction, confirming he had been waiting, not driving. Marin's account was clear and precise. The officers asked about the bikers. Marin said they had stopped to help. The officers looked at Graver. Graver looked back. Nothing more was needed. Lanigan went into the back of the patrol car, the door closed. The car pulled away, red and blue lights fading into the distance until there was nothing left but the dark road and the sound of wind through juniper. And then from behind them, from the direction of Flagstaff, the sound of engines. Not Harleys, something else. Heavier, quieter. The low growl of vehicles built for mass, not speed. 2 black SUVs crested the hill a quarter-mile back. Their headlights were off. They moved in the dark like shadows with weight visible only because the moonlight caught their windshields for a fraction of a second before the angle changed and they disappeared again. They were not speeding. They were not slow. They moved at the exact pace of vehicles that know where they are going and are in no hurry because the destination is not going anywhere. Graver saw them first. He always saw things first. It was the same instinct that had kept him alive for 30 years on roads that killed careful men. The instinct that reads the dark the way literate men read text, automatically, completely, without effort. He did not point, did not shout. He turned to Flint and spoke one word. Go. The formation assembled in seconds. Bikes first, Marin and her Civic engine rattling headlights on Ren buckled in the passenger seat with the fox patch backpack on her lap and the borrowed helmet still on the floorboard. The thick-bearded biker and the broad, silent one flanked the car like outriders escorting a carriage. Graver last. They pulled out. Fast, but not panicked. The controlled acceleration of a convoy that knows it is being watched and has chosen movement over confrontation. Not out of fear, out of strategy. There was a hearing in the morning. What mattered now was not the road. It was what came after. The SUVs did not follow. They sat on the hill for a long moment, two dark shapes against the star-filled sky engines idling. Graver watched them in his mirror. They were patient. They were expensive. They were the sort of vehicles driven by men who work for other men and do not ask questions about why. Then their headlights came on. Two pairs of white beams pointing at the empty stretch of highway where Marin's Civic had been parked, illuminating nothing, proving that the woman they had come to find was gone. They did not pursue. They did not need to. They knew where she lived. They had the address. They had always had the address. That was the point of the letter. That was the point of Lanigan. That was the point of all of it. Not to harm Marin Calloway, to delay her, to keep her busy and confused and afraid while Leland Croy pushed his paperwork through City Hall under the cover of a public hearing that no one would attend. But someone would attend now. 6 men in leather and the woman who had nothing left to lose except the truth. Graver checked his mirror one last time. The SUVs were turning around, heading back toward Flagstaff, toward the office of a councilman who would by now be checking his phone and finding no reply from a man named Duff Lanigan. A councilman who would sit in his leather chair and stare at the unanswered message and feel for the first time in a long while the particular cold that comes when a plan begins to unravel from the edges. The formation rode in silence. 6 Harleys and 1 rattling Civic moving through the Arizona night like a convoy through hostile territory. Ren sat behind Ryder, her arms aching, her face cold, her heart beating so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. But she was not afraid. Not anymore. The fear had burned itself out somewhere between the phone call and the moment her face hit her mother's jacket. In its place was something she could not name, but would carry for the rest of her life. The knowledge that the world is dangerous, and that sometimes the most dangerous-looking people in it are the ones who show up when no one else will. They reached Flagstaff at 9:30. The streets were quiet, porch lights on. A dog barking somewhere 3 blocks over the sound, carrying in the thin mountain air, the way sound does at altitude sharp and clear, and somehow lonely. The temperature had dropped 15 degrees since sundown. Breath came in faint clouds. The asphalt was cold enough that the Harley tires hissed differently on it, a higher pitch, the sound of rubber on pavement that has given up the day's heat and settled into the patient cold of an October night at 7,000 feet. The convoy turned onto Juniper Lane, and the sound of 6 Harley engines at low idle brought every neighbor to their window. This was not a street accustomed to noise. It was a street of single-story houses with chain-link fences and carports and yards where children's bicycles lay on their sides in the brown grass. A street where the loudest sound on a Tuesday evening was the garbage truck at 6 in the morning. 6 Harleys changed that. Faces appeared behind curtains. A porch light that had been off clicked on. A man in a bathrobe stepped outside, coffee mug in hand, and stopped on his top step with his mouth open. A woman who had been watering her front bed, one of those Arizona habits born of water restrictions that only allowed evening watering, dropped her hose and stood with water pooling around her slippers. The bikes lined up in front of 412 Juniper Lane. A small house, white paint going gray at the eaves, a porch with a rocking chair that had not rocked in months, and a ceramic pot holding the brown skeleton of a plant that had died sometime in August. A yard the size of a 2-car garage. The sort of house that costs everything a single mother earns in a year and still needs work she cannot afford. Marin pulled the Civic into the driveway, killed the engine, sat for a moment with both hands on the wheel, staring at the steering column, breathing. Then she got out. Ren got out. They stood on the driveway in the glow of 6 headlights, mother and daughter holding hands, looking at the row of motorcycles and the men who sat on them. Graver killed his engine, swung off the bike, walked to Marin. His boots were quiet on the concrete. His face was half lit by the headlights of the bikes behind him, half in shadow. He reached inside his jacket. Into the inner pocket, the one closest to the chest, the one where men keep things they do not show to strangers. He pulled out a patch of fabric, red faded to the color of old brick, edges frayed, skull and wings embroidered in heavy thread, the stitches uneven, the work of a hand that cared more about meaning than precision. Marin stared at it. Her hand went to her mouth. This was Kestrel's, Graver said. He gave it to me the last time I saw him. He said, keep it, to remember a good person who saved his life. He held it out to Marin. She took it with both hands. Her fingers trembled on the rough fabric. She turned it over, ran her thumb across the embroidered wings. The same wings on her wrist, the same wings on Graver's arm. 3 versions of the same promise scattered across years and 1,000 miles, meeting on a driveway in Flagstaff, Arizona on an October night. I did not do anything extraordinary, Marin said. Her voice was thick. I just did what a person should do. Graver shook his head. In our world, doing what a person should do is the most extraordinary thing there is. He stepped back, looked at her house, small and worn and standing on a foundation that held more than concrete and rebar. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock, we will be there. Marin looked at him, at the bikers, at the machines and the leather and the patches and the scars. She understood what he was offering. Not violence, not intimidation, presence, the simple, undeniable weight of people who show up. She nodded. Graver turned to his crew, helmets on, engines. They had places to be and 8 hours to prepare. Locke approached Marin before mounting his bike. He held out something small, a miniature helmet, red and black, the size of a child's fist. On each side, painted in careful white lines, a pair of small wings. For the kid, he said. So she remembers someone is always watching. Wren took it with both hands, held it up to the headlight. The tiny wings glowed. 6 engines fired. The ground shook. The neighbor in the bathrobe grabbed his porch railing. The woman with the hose just stood and watched water pooling around her feet. The formation pulled out. One by one, headlights sweeping the quiet street, chrome flashing engines settling into that deep rolling thunder that carried down the block and around the corner and out of sight. Graver was last. He looked back once, 1 second. At Marin and Wren standing on the driveway, the faded red patch in one hand, the miniature helmet in the other. 2 figures in the headlight glow small against the night, but standing. He nodded. Then the Harleys were gone, taillights fading, engine sound dissolving into the distance until it was just vibration, then memory, then silence. Marin and Wren stood on the driveway for a long time after the last sound disappeared. The night was cold. The stars were bright. A neighbor's dog had stopped barking. Wren looked up at her mother. Mom, are we going to be okay? Marin looked at the patch in her hand, at the tattoo on her wrist, at the house behind her that sat on the grave of a secret too old to count. Yes, she said, because tomorrow we are going to finish this. She took Wren's hand. They walked inside. The porch light stayed on. Marin sat at the kitchen table. From the top shelf of the hallway closet, she pulled a box. Cardboard, taped shut, dust on the lid. She had moved this box through 3 apartments, 2 states, and 1 house. She had never opened it. She had never been able to throw it away. She cut the tape, inside a spiral notebook. Nursing student handwriting, small and precise. Dated entries starting the night of March 14th, 2012. Wound descriptions, estimated blood loss. Medications administered from a first aid kit and a bottle of hydrogen peroxide. Timestamps. A sketch of the injuries drawn the way nurses draw, clinical and accurate and without sentiment. On the last page, a description. Male, mid-20s, clean-shaven, expensive watch, left wrist, gave orders. Others deferred to him, did not enter the room, stood in the hallway. Light from the ceiling fixture illuminated his face directly. She had written it long ago. She had kept it ever since. And tomorrow she would carry it into a room where Leland Croy sat in a leather chair behind a nameplate that said Councilman and show the world what was written on those pages. She closed the notebook, pressed her palms flat on the table, breathed. In the other room, Wren lay in bed, the miniature helmet on the pillow beside her. Through the wall, she could hear her mother moving in the kitchen, opening a box, turning pages. She held the helmet close. The tiny painted wings caught the moonlight from the window. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow, Mom finishes the story. She closed her eyes. The house was quiet. The street was quiet. Flagstaff was quiet. But somewhere not far away, 6 Harley engines idled in the dark, waiting for morning. Morning came to Flagstaff the way it always does in October. Slowly, the sun reaching over the San Francisco peaks to the northeast, light spreading across the plateau, like water finding its level touching the pine tops first, then the rooftops, then the streets, then the frost on the windshields of cars that had sat out all night. Marin Calloway was awake before the light reached Juniper Lane. She had not slept. She had sat at the kitchen table until 2 in the morning, reading the spiral notebook she had not opened in over a decade. Every page, every entry, every clinical notation in the small, precise handwriting of a 22-year-old nursing student who had documented the injuries of a stranger the way she had been trained to document everything, without sentiment, without omission, with the accuracy that holds up under questioning because it was never written to persuade. It was written to remember. At 6, she showered, dressed, not in scrubs, not in the jeans and worn sweater she wore on days off. She put on the one pair of black slacks she owned, the ones she had bought 3 years ago for a coworker's funeral and had not worn since. A white blouse she found at the back of the closet still in the dry cleaning bag. Flat shoes because she did not own heels and would not have worn them if she did. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. The face that looked back was tired. 34 years of tired, a particular kind of tired that lives not in the muscles but in the bones. But the eyes were steady, the jaw was set. The woman in the mirror was not the frightened 22-year-old who had slid down a motel wall shaking after lying to 4 men in a hallway. She was not the woman who had spent a decade hiding in small towns in long sleeves and double shifts. She was the woman who had opened a box last night and found inside it not just evidence, but the version of herself she had locked away with it. She pulled her left sleeve back, looked at the tattoo, the skull, the wings, the crack. She did not pull the sleeve down. She rolled it to the elbow and left it there. At 7:30, she made Wren breakfast. Scrambled eggs and toast. Wren came out of her room in her school clothes, the miniature helmet in one hand, her sketchbook in the other. She sat at the table and looked at her mother's arm and saw the tattoo uncovered for the first time in memory. Mom, your sleeve. Marin set the plate down, sat across from her. I am not hiding it anymore. Wren looked at her mother's face. 9 years old is young, but it is not blind. She saw something in her mother's expression that she had never seen before. Not fear, not exhaustion. Something that looked to a 9-year-old like the face her mother made when she was about to do something hard, but right, like the time she told the landlord the heater had to be fixed, or she was calling the city, or the time she stayed at the hospital for 20 straight hours because a patient had no one else. Are you going to that meeting today, Mom? Yes. Can I come? Marin hesitated. 1 breath. 2. Yes, you can come. At 8:45, Marin's silver Civic pulled out of the driveway on Juniper Lane. The neighbor in the bathrobe was outside again, retrieving his newspaper. He saw the car and paused. Something about the way it moved. Not the usual rattle and hesitation. It pulled out clean and sure like a vehicle was somewhere important to be. He watched it turn the corner and disappear. 15 minutes later, the sound began. Far off, growing. The low rolling thunder that Juniper Lane had heard once last night and had not expected to hear again. 6 Harleys turned onto the street at 9 o'clock exactly. Formation tight, engines at low idle. They did not stop at 412. They passed through heading toward downtown, toward City Hall, toward a room where a man in a leather chair was about to learn that the past does not stay buried just because you pour concrete over it. Flagstaff City Hall is a 2-story building on North San Francisco Street, sandstone, and glass built in the 70s and renovated twice since without ever losing its institutional feel. The lobby smells of floor wax and old paper. A directory on the wall lists council chambers, permits code enforcement, and public records. The floors are linoleum. The lights are fluorescent. The sort of building designed to make power feel boring so that the people who wield it can do so without anyone looking too closely. Council Chamber B is on the 2nd floor. A rectangular room with rows of folding chairs facing a raised platform where 5 council seats sit behind a curved oak desk. Microphones, nameplates, water pitchers with condensation beating on the glass, an American flag on a stand in the corner, a seal of the city on the wall behind the chairs. At 9:40, the room was half full. Residents of the East Flagstaff corridor, summoned by the same sort of letters Marin had received, sat in the folding chairs with the glazed patience of people who have been to public hearings before and know that nothing ever changes but attendance is required to maintain the illusion that it might. A woman from the planning department arranged papers at a side table. A court reporter set up her machine. Two local journalists sat in the back row, notebooks, open pens uncapped, expecting nothing worth writing about. At 9:45, Leland Croy entered from the side door. He was 51 years old, tall, lean in the way of men who run 3 miles every morning and eat lunch at their desk. Gray at the temples, the rest dark cut short and combed without a visible part. His suit was charcoal, his tie was blue, his shoes were polished to a shine that reflected the fluorescent lights. He wore no watch. He had stopped wearing watches 2 years ago, though the people in this room did not know that, and the reason he stopped was not a matter of fashion. He sat in his chair, adjusted the microphone, opened a folder. His face was composed, the face of a man who has done this many times and expects to do it many more. The face of institutional power at rest. He glanced at the room. Residents, staff, reporters, normal, expected, controlled. He checked his phone once under the desk, a quick downward glance. No messages from Lanigan. He had sent 3 texts since last night. None returned. This bothered him, but not enough to show. Lanigan was unreliable. That was why he was useful. Unreliable men do not make credible witnesses. They drink too much and forget too much, and when questioned, they contradict themselves until their testimony becomes vapor. Croy had chosen him precisely for this quality, a disposable instrument, a man whose word would never outweigh a councilman's. He put the phone away, straightened his tie. Whatever had happened on the highway last night, the hearing would proceed. The votes were counted before the chairs were set up. 3 of the 5 council members owed him favors that were never discussed aloud, but were always remembered at the right moments. The acquisition would pass. The demolition permits would follow. And the foundation of a motel that had been torn down 8 years ago, a foundation that might or might not still hold traces of blood and violence, and the worst night of Leland Croy's former life, would disappear under 6 inches of new concrete in a parking structure that no one had asked for and everyone would accept. This was how things worked. This was how things had always worked. Power does not need to be dramatic. It needs to be patient, and Leland Croy had been patient for a very long time. Then the door at the back of the chamber opened. 6 men walked in, single file, quiet. Their boots hit the linoleum with a sound that was not loud, but was present the way a bass drum is present beneath an orchestra, felt more than heard. Each body filled the doorframe for a moment before moving through each silhouette wide enough that the fluorescent hallway light behind them was blocked completely, casting a brief shadow down the center aisle before the next man stepped through. Leather vests over flannel and denim, patches sewn and riveted across shoulders and backs. No helmets, no sunglasses, nothing to hide behind. Graver first steel gray hair faced like carved granite eyes sweeping the room in a single pass that missed nothing and acknowledged nothing. Then Flint's silver beard to his chest, hands at his sides, each step slow and deliberate with the gravity of a man who has earned the right to take his time. Then Ryder, the youngest, jaw-tight, eyes forward, the controlled energy of a coiled spring visible in his shoulders and the set of his fists. Then Locke, lean, long-haired, moving with quiet efficiency. Then the thick-bearded one, broad as a doorframe. Then the silent one, the largest of them all, whose very stillness was a kind of statement. They moved down the center aisle. 6 men in formation, not military, something older. The formation of men who have walked into rooms that did not want them for decades and have never once apologized for arriving. They took the last row of folding chairs on the left side. They sat without speaking, hands on their thighs, back straight, eyes forward. 6 leather-clad statues in a room of civilians. They did not look at Croy. They did not need to. Their presence was the message. We are here, we are watching, we will not leave. The room shifted, the way a room shifts when a new weight is added and the floor has to find a new balance. Residents turned in their chairs. The journalists stopped writing and started looking. The woman from the planning department paused mid-staple and did not resume. One of the council aides leaned toward another and whispered something behind a clipboard. The whisper was sharp and brief and ended with both of them looking at the back row. Croy saw them. His hand reaching for the water pitcher stopped. His fingers hovered above the glass for a moment that lasted longer than moments should. Something crossed his face. Not recognition, not fear, not yet. The involuntary response of a man whose peripheral vision has detected something that does not belong in the pattern he has spent months constructing. An anomaly, a variable he did not account for. He poured the water, drank, set the glass down. His face recomposed itself, but the effort of recomposition was visible to anyone who knew where to look. In the tightness at the corner of his mouth, in the way his left hand, the one under the desk where no one could see, closed slowly into a fist and stayed there. At 9:55, Maren Calloway walked through the door. She held the spiral notebook in her right hand. Wren walked beside her, clutching her mother's left hand. The miniature helmet was in her backpack. The sketchbook was in her other hand, pressed against her chest like armor. Maren walked down the center aisle. She did not look at the bikers. She did not look at Croy. She looked at the empty chair in the front row, the one reserved for public speakers, and she walked toward it the way she had once walked toward a motel room door, with a bleeding stranger behind her and 4 men in the hallway ahead. Straight, steady, without stopping. She sat. Wren sat beside her, small legs not reaching the floor, sneakers dangling, sketchbook on her lap, already drawing. Croy's eyes found Maren. Found the woman in black slacks and a white blouse with her left sleeve rolled to the elbow. Found the tattoo on her wrist visible, even from the raised platform, even under fluorescent light, even across 15 feet of institutional air. His face did not change, but his breathing did. The rise and fall of his chest, which had been even and shallow, became deeper, slower, the breathing of a man who is controlling something that wants very badly to be uncontrolled. The hearing was called to order at 10 o'clock. A gavel, a formality. The planning department representative spoke first. Maps on an easel, zoning overlays, projected economic impact. The language of municipal power, dense and numbing, designed to make decisions sound like weather. Inevitable, impersonal, beyond the reach of the people they affect. 3 residents spoke, each one polite, each one concerned, each one ignored by the platform with the practiced courtesy of officials who have already decided and are simply running out the clock on public comment. At 10:22, the moderator looked at the sign-up sheet. Maren Calloway. Maren stood. She picked up the spiral notebook. She left Wren in the chair. Wren did not reach for her. She watched her mother walk to the podium the way she watched everything, with the patient attention of a child who draws what she sees and sees more than most adults. Maren placed the notebook on the podium. She did not open it. Not yet. She adjusted the microphone, looked at the room, the residents, the journalists, the bikers in the back row, 6 men in leather sitting perfectly still, 6 pairs of eyes locked on the woman at the microphone. Then she looked at Croy. He looked back. His face was stone, professional stone, the sort of stone that costs money to maintain. Maren spoke. Her voice was clear, not loud, not dramatic. The voice of a woman who has spent years in emergency rooms where clarity saves lives and hesitation kills. My name is Maren Calloway. I live at 412 Juniper Lane. I received a letter informing me that my home has been identified for acquisition under the East Flagstaff Redevelopment Initiative. I am here to speak against that acquisition, but not for the reasons you expect. She paused. The room was still. A journalist in the back row leaned forward. I am not here to talk about property values. I am not here to talk about zoning or economic impact or community development. I am here because I know why this particular piece of land was selected. And the reason has nothing to do with development. Croy's hand moved to the microphone in front of him. The motion was small, preparatory, the motion of a man who intends to interrupt. Maren continued. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. In March of 2012, I saved a man's life. He had been beaten on a road outside a motel in East Las Vegas. I was a nursing student. I pulled him inside, treated his injuries, and hid him for 3 days, while the men who attacked him searched room by room. When they came to my door, I lied to their faces. She paused, let the room absorb it, then continued each sentence a step closer to the man on the platform. One of those men gave the orders. I saw his face through the crack in the door before I opened it. Young, clean-shaven, expensive watch on his left wrist. I wrote a physical description that same night, and I have carried it since. Marin lifted her left arm, turned her wrist toward the room. The tattoo was visible to every person in the chamber. Small, faded. A skull in a winged helmet, a hairline crack on the right wing where the needle had jumped. The man I saved gave me this before he disappeared. In his world, it means protection. It means someone remembers. She lowered her arm. 2 years ago, I saw the face of the man who gave those orders in a campaign photograph in the Flagstaff Daily Sun. Leland Croy, running for city council. Same face, same jaw, same eyes. The room was no longer still. It was frozen, a state beyond stillness. Marin opened the spiral notebook, held it up so the room could see the handwriting, small and precise, filling every line. This is my documentation from that night. Wound descriptions, timestamps, medications, and on the last page, a physical description of the man who ordered the attack. I wrote it in 2012. I have not changed a word. She set the notebook down, looked at Croy. The property at 412 Juniper Lane sits on the foundation of that motel. It was demolished 8 years ago. Houses were built over it, but the original foundation is still there, under my house, under my neighbor's house, and whatever physical evidence remains from that night is preserved in that concrete. She closed the notebook, held it against her chest. This land acquisition is not about development. It is about demolition. It is about burying the last evidence of a crime committed by the man sitting in that chair. She pointed. A straight finger, a direct line. From her hand to Leland Croy. The chamber erupted. Not loudly. The eruption of a room that does not know how to process what it has heard. Residents turned to each other. The journalists were writing furiously. The other council members looked at Croy with expressions that ranged from confusion to the beginning of something much colder. The planning department representative set her papers down and stepped back from the table as though the documents themselves had become contaminated. Croy's face had changed. The stone was cracking, not from guilt, from the pressure of maintaining composure when every eye in the room is searching for the first fissure. His left hand was white-knuckled under the desk. His right hand gripped the microphone. He spoke. His voice was controlled, but the control was visible like scaffolding on a building that everyone can now see is damaged. These are serious allegations. This is not the appropriate forum for. This hearing is about municipal land use, and I will not allow it to be. He stopped, because the door at the back of the chamber had opened again. Not the main door, the side door, the one that led from the hallway where the restrooms and the vending machines were. The door that no one had been watching because there was nothing behind it worth watching. A man stepped through. He was not tall, average height, lean. The kind of lean that comes from years of walking when you cannot afford to drive and eating when you can't afford to eat. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt and work boots that had been resoled more than once. His hair was dark shot through with gray at the temples. He moved with a limp, a hitch in his right leg that was visible with every step, permanent damage from a joint that was broken and healed without a surgeon's attention. His face was weathered, lined, the face of a man who has spent years outdoors in places where the sun does not forgive and the wind does not stop. But his eyes were sharp, clear, the eyes of someone who has been watching from a height for a long time and has finally come down. Graver saw him first. Graver, who had spent all that time searching. Graver, who had ridden every road between Nevada and Montana. Graver, who had buried the hope of finding his brother so deep inside himself that he had forgotten the shape of it. He stood, the folding chair scraped back. His hands hung at his sides. His face did nothing. His face was steel. But his eyes did everything his face refused to do. Flint stood next, then Ryder, then Locke. One by one, the bikers rose from the back row of Council Chamber B, Flagstaff City Hall, and stood in silence as the man with the limp walked down the center aisle. Kestrel, the name was not spoken aloud. It did not need to be. It moved through the room the way heat moves through metal, from one point of contact outward until everything it touches is changed. Marin turned from the podium. Her hand went to her mouth. The notebook slipped in her grip. She caught it, held it, stared at the man walking toward her with a face she had not seen since that night in Vegas, but had never stopped seeing in the dark behind her eyelids when sleep finally came. He was alive, thinner, older, broken in places that showed and places that did not, but alive. Kestrel walked to the front of the chamber. He did not look at the council platform. He did not look at Croy. He looked at Marin. A long look. The sort of look that carries years of silence and gratitude and guilt and distance and compresses them into a single moment of eye contact that says everything and asks for nothing. Then he turned to the room. He sat in the witness chair beside the podium. A chair that was there for legal proceedings, not public hearings, but no one told him to move because no one in the room was capable of speech. He spoke. His voice was rough from years of disuse or years of not speaking to people who mattered, or years of living in the spaces between towns where the only conversation is with the road. My name is Cody Graver. Most people call me Kestrel. On the night of March 14th, 2012, I was attacked on a road outside a motel in East Las Vegas by three men acting on the orders of a fourth. I was beaten until I could not stand. I crawled to the nearest door. A woman I had never met opened it and pulled me inside. She kept me alive for 3 days. She lied to the men who came looking for me. She risked her life for a stranger. He paused, looked at the council platform. The man who ordered that attack is sitting in this room. Croy stood up. His chair rolled back and hit the wall behind him. His face was no longer stone. It was something else. The face of a man who has spent years building a wall and has just watched it come down in less than 60 seconds. This is absurd. This is a public hearing on municipal land use. I am calling a recess. One of the other council members, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses and a legal pad, put her hand on his arm. Sit down, Leland. Croy looked at her. The look lasted 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, he saw what she already knew, that the room had shifted, that the reporters were writing, that the court reporter was recording every word, that the 6 men in the back row were standing and watching, and that their presence was not a threat, but a testimony, the testimony of men who had come to bear witness and whose silence was louder than anything Croy could say. He sat, slowly, like a man lowering himself into water that is colder than he expected. Kestrel continued, I can identify the 3 men who attacked me. 2 are dead. 1 is serving time in Nevada for an unrelated charge. But the man who ordered the attack, the man who stood in the hallway and told them to find me, is the same man who sent a letter to this woman's home last week trying to take her property. The same man who paid someone to keep her on a dark road last night so she would not be here this morning. He reached into his shirt pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, set it on the podium. This is a signed statement, notarized, naming Leland Croy as the individual who ordered my assault in 2012. I am prepared to testify to this in any court at any time under any oath. The room held its breath. 20 people, residents, staff, journalists, bikers, all holding the same breath, waiting for it to break. Marin stepped forward, placed her spiral notebook beside Kestrel's statement, her medical documentation from 2012. Years of evidence she had carried across state lines and through a decade of silence, preserved not because she planned to use it, but because she could not make herself destroy it. The habit of a nurse. Document everything. You never know when someone will need the record. She looked at Croy. One last time, I stood in a doorway long ago and told a lie to protect a stranger. Today, I am standing in a different doorway, and this time I am telling the truth. Croy's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound. His hands were flat on the desk, fingers spread wide, the posture of a man trying to hold himself upright through the surface beneath him. The councilwoman with the reading glasses picked up her phone, dialed, spoke quietly. Then she looked at the room. I am requesting a suspension of this hearing pending review. I have contacted the Flagstaff Police Department. Croy did not run. He did not shout. He did not make the speech that men in his position sometimes make, the speech about persecution and witch hunts in the destruction of a good man's reputation. He had no speech left. The words had been taken from him the way water is taken from a sponge, squeezed out by the weight of 2 testimonies in a spiral notebook, in the 6 men in the back row who had not said a word and did not need to. He sat in his leather chair behind his nameplate and stared at the back wall of the chamber. His hands were on the desk, palms down, fingers no longer gripping, no longer fisted, just resting. The hands of a man who has let go of something he has been holding for a long time and does not yet understand the emptiness. The room emptied around him. Residents stood and filed out, some whispering, some silent, all of them carrying a story they would tell at dinner tables and in grocery store aisles for years to come. The journalists were already on their phones dictating notes, the urgency in their voices audible, even as whispers. The planning department representative gathered her papers into a folder and left through the side door without looking at the platform. Two police officers entered through the main door. They walked down the center aisle with the unhurried pace of men who know that the person they are approaching has nowhere left to go. They stood on either side of Croy's chair. One of them spoke. The words were quiet and procedural. "Sir, we need you to come with us, please." Croy stood. He buttoned his jacket. The gesture was automatic, the muscle memory of a man who has spent years maintaining appearances. He walked between the officers, down the center aisle, past the empty chairs, past the podium, where the spiral notebook still lay open to the last page. He did not look at it. He did not look at Marin. He did not look at the bikers. He looked straight ahead at the door, at the hallway beyond it, at the fluorescent light that made everything look the same. The door closed behind them. The sound was not loud. It was the sound of a latch catching a mechanism completing its function, metal meeting metal in the frame. The ordinary sound of a door doing what doors do. But in that room on that morning, it was the loudest sound anyone had ever heard. The sort of sound a door makes when it closes on everything. In the hallway outside the chamber, Graver stood facing Kestrel, 5 feet apart, close enough to touch. Neither moved. The hallway was empty except for them. Fluorescent lights casting that flat institutional glow that makes everything look the same. Linoleum floor, a vending machine humming in the corner, its compressor cycling on and off with a rhythm that sounded in the silence like breathing. A bulletin board on the wall with notices about water conservation and a community pancake breakfast that had happened 3 weeks ago. The sounds of the chamber leaked through the closed door. Voices, movement, the particular buzz of a room processing something it was not built to process. But in the hallway, none of that mattered. In the hallway, there were only 2 men and all the years of absence between them. Graver looked at his brother. He looked at the limp first because the limp was what hit him hardest. Not the gray hair, not the lines, not the weathering. The limp, because the limp was from that night. The limp was the thing Marin Calloway had tried to fix with butterfly strips and hydrogen peroxide in a motel room, and it had not fully healed, and it would never fully heal, and Graver was looking at the permanent evidence of the night that had taken his brother from him. He looked at Kestrel's hands, rough, calloused, the hands of a man who had worked labor jobs in small towns under names that were not his own. He looked at the flannel shirt, clean, but old washed so many times the plaid had faded to suggestion. He looked at the boots, resoled, twice the sort of repair a man makes when new boots are not an option. Years of running, years of hiding, years of being alive and letting the people who loved him believe he might be dead. All of it written on the man standing 5 feet away. "You are alive." 2 words. Everything he had wanted to say compressed into 2 syllables that were not enough and were more than enough. Kestrel nodded. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. The steadiness of someone who has rehearsed this moment 1,000 times and knows that if he lets the rehearsal go, the real thing will break him. "I am sorry I disappeared. I thought if I stayed gone, they would stop looking. For me, for her, for anyone connected to that night. I thought distance was protection." Graver's jaw worked. A muscle jumped beneath his beard. The muscle of a man holding back something that wants to come out as a shout or a so and will be allowed to be neither. "I looked for you. 3 years. Every contact, every road, every motel from here to the Canadian border." "I know." Kestrel's voice cracked on the second word. He caught it the way someone catches a glass falling off a table. Fast, tight, before it shatters. "Flint got word to me 2 days ago. He found a number I had not changed because part of me always hoped someone would call it. When he told me what was happening, what Croy was doing, what Marin was facing, I drove straight through. 18 hours from a town in Wyoming you have never heard of. I did not stop." Graver stepped forward. One step, his arms came up. Not fast, not gentle. The way someone lifts something that is both heavy and fragile and infinitely valuable. He put his arms around his brother and held him. The leather of his vest creaked. Kestrel's flannel shirt was thin enough that Graver could feel the bones of his back sharper than they should have been the bones of a man who had not always eaten when he should have. They stood like that for a long time. Neither spoke. The vending machine hummed. The fluorescent light buzzed. Footsteps passed somewhere on another floor. The world went on the way it always does when two people are standing still inside a moment that the world does not know is happening. Outside Flagstaff City Hall, the October sun was high and warm. Marin sat on the front steps, the spiral notebook in her lap, Wren beside her. Wren had her sketchbook open. She was drawing. Not the chamber, not Croy, not the police officers. She was drawing Kestrel, the man who had walked through the side door, the man with the limp and the weathered face and the clear eyes. She drew him the way she drew everyone, carefully, patiently, getting the nose wrong and erasing it and trying again. The bikers emerged from the building one by one. Flint first squinting at the sun, his silver beard catching the light like tinsel. Ryder stretching his arms over his head, rolling his neck, the tension of the morning finally releasing from his shoulders. Locke checking his phone, then putting it away with the finality of a man who has decided the screen has nothing left to offer. The thick-bearded one lighting a cigarette he would smoke halfway and then crush under his boot because he was trying to quit, and halfway was progress. The broad, silent one, standing with his hands in his pockets, face tilted toward the sky, eyes closed, absorbing the sun the way a man absorbs silence after noise. Then Graver and Kestrel, side by side, walking in step, though neither was trying to. The rhythm of men who had once walked the same floors and ridden the same roads and shared the same blood. The rhythm that distance could not erase because it was not learned. It was born. Marin stood when she saw Kestrel. He stopped at the bottom of the steps, looked up at her. The sunlight hit the side of his face, and she could see for the first time in full daylight the scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. A line she had tried to close with butterfly strips and steady hands in a room that smelled of bleach and fear. The scar had healed the way scars heal when there is no surgeon and no anesthetic and no time. Rough, permanent, a record written in skin. She did not speak. She did not need to. She held up her left wrist. The tattoo, the skull, the wings, the crack. Kestrel looked at it. His face did something that was not quite a smile and not quite tears and not quite anything that had a name. It was the expression of a man looking at proof that he was not forgotten, that the one good thing he did in a life that had not always been good had lasted. You kept it, he said. You kept breathing, she said. That was all. That was enough. Graver stepped forward. He reached inside his jacket, pulled out Lanigan's phone in its plastic bag. Held it up. This goes to the police, along with your notebook and Kestrel's statement. Everything documented, everything legal, everything clean. Marin nodded, the way she had nodded at every step of this. Not passively, deliberately. The nod of a woman who has chosen to stop hiding and will not look back. Graver looked at her, a long look. The sort of look he had given her on the driveway the night before, measuring not just the person but the distance between what she had endured and what she had done about it. You stood in a doorway, he said, a long time ago and again today. Both times you could have stayed silent. Both times you chose not to. He paused. That is the bravest thing I have ever seen, and I have seen a lot. Marin's eyes were bright, but she did not cry. She had done enough crying. What came next was not tears. It was the quiet, solid feeling of a woman who has set something down that she has been carrying too long and can finally feel the weight of its absence. Wren tugged her mother's hand. She held up the sketchbook. On the page was Kestrel, his limp captured in the angle of his stance, his scar a thin pencil line from temple to jaw. His eyes, even in graphite, were clear. She had gotten the nose right on the first try. That evening, Marin and Wren sat on the porch of 412 Juniper Lane. The rocking chair moved in a slow rhythm that matched the cooling of the day. The ceramic pot with the dead plant sat where it always sat, but Marin had set the faded red patch beside it, the embroidered skull and wings facing outward, catching the last of the light. The sun was going down behind the peaks, painting the sky in bands of orange and red, and the deep bruised purple that only exists at 7,000 feet, where the atmosphere is thin enough that color reaches deeper into the spectrum before it fades. Wren held the miniature helmet in her lap. She turned it in her hands, watching the tiny painted wings catch the last light. The wings glowed orange, then red, then purple, changing with the sky. Mom. Yes. Are they going to come back? The motorcycle men. Marin looked at the street. Empty now, quiet. The neighbor's dog was barking again 3 houses down. The same aimless bark it had been barking for years, a sound so familiar it was almost silence. I do not know, she said. Maybe. Wren thought about this, turned the helmet again, ran her thumb over the tiny painted wings the way she had once run her thumb over the tattoo on her mother's wrist. I think they will, she said, because Mr. Graver looked back. When they were leaving last night, he looked back at us. People who look back always come back. Marin smiled, not the guarded smile she had worn for years, not the tired smile of a woman working 2 jobs and raising a child alone and hiding a tattoo under long sleeves. A real one. The sort that starts slow and goes deep and changes the shape of a face because it comes from a place that has been locked for a long time and is finally open. They sat on the porch until the streetlights came on, until the stars appeared one by one the way they always did in Flagstaff, thick and bright and close enough to touch. Until the air turned cold enough that Wren pulled her hoodie sleeves over her hands, and Marin wrapped an arm around her, and they sat together in the dark, 2 people on a porch in a small town in Arizona, breathing the same air, watching the same sky safe. From somewhere far away so far, it might have been imagination, or might have been the desert playing tricks with sound. The way it plays tricks with light came the low rumble of a motorcycle engine. One engine. Steady. Not approaching. Not retreating. Just present. The sound of a machine on a road that goes on forever. Ridden by a man who has spent his life on those roads and has finally found a reason to come back to the place where the road began. Wren closed her eyes, held the miniature helmet against her chest. The tiny wings pressed into her palms, small and sharp and warm from her hands. Good night, Iron Angels. The sound faded. The street was silent. The stars were bright. The porch light stayed on. And in the small house on Juniper Lane, where the foundation held more than concrete and the walls held more than a family, and the closet shelf held a box that was finally empty, a woman and her daughter slept without fear for the first time in a very long while.